Hi, this is Pip Nixon here with my spoiler-free review of Trainspotting 2. I have a special guest star on this video, which is my best mate, Chris Chapman, he's a media professional, so we'll take his opinions very seriously.
Yes.
We watched Trainspotting 2 last night. It's one of those films that you approach with a certain trepidation, having been burned by Zoolander 2 or Indiana Jones 4 or any of those kind of things.
I wasn't thinking of Zoolander 2 when I watched it. It's nice that you were making that connection.
I was, yeah. And because Trainspotting was such a zeitgeisty film and it summed up its era so much, and it meant quite a lot to me. I think I watched it before I was 18, but to see it again in a kind of sequel form, I was very nervous that it would be rubbish. And obviously some of the people involved, like Ewan McGregor, has gone on to make masterpieces like Moulin Rouge, but also terrible films like The Island. Danny Boyle's won an Oscar for Slumdog Millionaire, and then had all the glory and success of the Olympics. So going in, I was very nervous about watching it. But the lovely thing is, actually, I thought it was a really good film. It recreates some of the set pieces and some of the imagery of the original movie, but it gives the actors a lot of interesting stuff to do. It tells an interesting story about the consequences of the first film and of getting old and the kind of maturity of that, even though Ewan McGregor still looks pretty beautiful in his 40s.
I thought he was looking a little bit more grizzled around the neck this time, that he's starting to age in a delayed, like 10 years behind kind of way.
Well, they do quite a lot of cross-cutting between the first film and this film, don't they, which really brings home how thin and that kind of heroin chic thing that they have in the 90s. But it does tell a story about middle age, and it has its own kind of energetic rhythm. As much as the original Trainspotting is about the soundtrack and the energy of it in that first 30 seconds, it's so exciting. This film finds its own rhythm that's quite interesting, and it recreates the choose life bit from the start of the original film in the middle with real emotional impact. I found it quite moving. It has its own, it has its own vibe, and it also takes some of the actors who we would like to see more of over the years, like say, Robert Carlyle, who's such a a terrific actor. It gives him a lot more to do. It makes Begbie a much more sort of interesting and kind of a tragic comic character in it, as opposed to the kind of the fearsome force of the original. So yeah, I mean it's 2 hours long, but I found it really engaging, really energetic. And it kept me throughout. And considering it is a sequel to something so influential and so classic, I thought it does a great job of being nostalgic, but finding its own reason to exist, giving the actors something interesting to do, and finding its own kind of comic energy that that I really enjoyed. What did you think?
Well, I thought it was interesting because it was one of those films that nobody, I'd think, was crying out after Trainspotting for a sequel, or to know what Renton would do with the £16,000, or what would happen next. And yet there's been so much talk over the years of will they do another one. I think just because people loved that group of actors.
Well, there is another book, isn't there, as well? There's a book which
and there was the other book, but actually I didn't need there to be a sequel to Trainspotting, and I liked that the film kind of seemed to acknowledge that and just was a kind of a very, very different type of film. And although it has those callbacks to the music and some of the shots of the original, it doesn't mimic the original. It felt more like the film had grown up like the characters. And I think there's like a subgenre, isn't there, of movies where it's friends coming back together into the old town after years of not seeing each other.
That's another example of this.
A recent example is something like The World's End.
Right.
With Simon Pegg, which I wasn't a huge fan of the end result, but actually I liked the stuff of the friends coming back together, and even in terms of Stephen King, in terms of It and stuff like that, that's very furtive ground, and I think that bringing those actors back together who have all had such history since that film made it quite interesting, made it quite moving actually to see those relationships kind of rekindled, and you feel like that's saying something meta to the audience as well about our own relationship with Trainspotting and returning to it after 20 years. So I like that. I like that it felt different. I thought it was quite interesting that Bigby actually seemed to be played far more for laughs up until a point. That the bit I really enjoyed most in it is when they actually meet in the toilet cubicles. Is a really nicely set up scene. And up until that point, Bigby has been kind of comic and kind of fish out of water kind of character. And so it's interesting that they played him not so much. I remember him being terrifying in the original, throwing the glass over his shoulder and everything, being absolutely terrifying, and it was interesting to see him play differently. So I found it a lot fresher, and I thought it deserved to exist, which is something I didn't expect, and I guess that's down to Danny Boyle and the cast taking enough of a look at why there should be a sequel.
No, it doesn't feel like it's a smug cash-in, does it? It feels like it does find its own reason to exist. And like you say about seeing Robert Carlyle, he has that phase in the 90s where he's a great character actor in things like Cracker, but then there's quite a move to make him a leading man, isn't there, around the full Monty era, even though he looks quite different to a traditional leading man. But he's one of the most interesting character actors that we have. And actually McGregor himself can be quite hard to cast, can't he? He's not always worked out as the leading man in the traditional role. He's sort of floated beneath that.
And he's not that, is he? He needs to be slightly offbeat, slightly weird for it to really work.
And they give Johnny Lee Miller a lot of stuff to do, presumably because he's so successful with Elementary.
I think that's fair enough. I think Sick Boy's in the first film more than you remember. I think and their friendship and all that stuff when they sit in the park and shoot dogs up the arse, that's quite good friendshipy stuff that they do return to. I thought it looked great as well. I thought that I love the scenes when they were using cartoon heads over people and stuff. That was all great. Because that's stuff that's not necessarily in the DNA of the first film that Boyle is kind of bringing new to the table.
Yeah, no, there's a kind of visual invention to it, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
But are we saying overall better than Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull?
Yeah, a lot better. I think it's very hard to go back to your film series 20 years on and make something
better than Zoolander 2, are we saying?
Better than Zoolander 2. The biggest gap was between Wizard of Oz and Return to Oz, isn't it? But I like Return to Oz, so that's
and there's an emotionality, a bit like if anyone's watching the revival of Twin Peaks, of just seeing people that you remember being very young and beautiful who are now older, like we are, I suppose, and looking slightly different to how they used to. But overall, it's probably a film that people approach quite sceptically, but it's definitely worth it. I found it very entertaining. It does bring something fresh and new to the what we're in now, not the noughties, the teens. Are we in? Yeah. So
the late teens.
The late teens, yeah. So it has a go at refreshing itself and finding something new in the zeitgeist. So yeah, I would definitely give it a go.